Hey, we're back again. It's the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, the podcast so honest it hurts. We are back. Adam has just returned from a jaunt over the seas to the European continent, where he went to Paris and to Barcelona for the Mobile World Congresses. And I've just been sitting here. I've been sitting here, dutifully perseverating over things that I shouldn't worry about, because that's what I do. But we've got
rumination.
Yes, we've got some stuff that we're going to talk about today, although Adam doesn't know what any of it is because I didn't tell him yet, because I just figured it out 5 minutes before we started recording. But
we talked briefly. It's like, hey man, I know you got back late last night, but let's do the podcast tomorrow. And by the way, I've got some important things I need to tell you.
Yeah. Well, and the most important, if you're a longtime listener to the podcast and you want to continue to be able to watch or listen, we are moving the podcast to another channel. The podcast is going to leave Painfully Honest Tech and go over to a Painfully Honest Tech podcast YouTube channel. What that address will be right now, I don't know specifically, but it will be linked in the description below, and I'll put like arrows toward it, and like all that kind of stuff. So if you're somebody who listens regularly or wants to start, please go over and subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss any Painfully Honest Tech podcast content. We're trying to clean up the Painfully Honest Tech has just kind of become like all kinds of different things are happening on the channel. So we're trying to clean it up a little bit, trying to get the podcast its own space to exist in, and go from there. So do check that out, and subscribe. I don't care if we're
as soon as you can.
Stop watching right now. Click right click, open in a new tab, and then hit subscribe. You can leave this playing. You're not missing anything. We're just sitting here talking. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do. New channel for the podcast. And also the podcast is going to relaunch in its audio form. Working on that now. And I got to get a few things worked out, because it used to be in the podcast world, like in the audio world, and then I tried to restart it, but then it wasn't populating. So I have to talk to the podcast host company and figure out what's going on. But we're making the podcast more official, I guess.
Yeah. So instead of being like, okay, Jason has his Painfully Honest Tech channel, and then there's the weekly podcast, it's going to be a dedicated podcast channel. So
correct.
Me, Jason, every week, our own home. So what'll be nice though is because it actually opens up more opportunities, because one, we can have dedicated community posts, you can have membership benefits, if we get whatever. That's not even a thought right now, but we can do things like
specifically for the podcast
shorts there. Yeah. It's specifically a home for that, which one, it allows me to get more engaged as well. So it's like a home for both of us to create and grow this. And it does seem like not most people, but I mean, the people that show up and listen to us seem to like to listen to us talk. So, and we like to talk. So it's a really good, symbiotic relationship. We talk, y'all like to listen, and we want to keep talking.
It's nice because, nobody usually, in my real life, nobody listens to me talk. I sit down here in my basement, I talk to myself, and everybody else is just like, what's he going on about? So anyway, a couple of things have been going on in the tech world in general. I've kind of been somewhat out of touch, but some things have permeated my bubble of self-absorption. One of which being Apple has decided to not do their Apple Car. That was announced a couple of days ago.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising, because I thought that they were all on board with that, and I guess they were till they weren't.
Well, it didn't seem like it was this long, but I guess they've been actively working on the Apple Car as a part of the company for 10 years.
Yeah, it's been like a decade. And we heard about this a long time ago, and it's like the Apple Car's happening, it's not happening, it's happening in 5 years, they're working on this. So I didn't care because I'm not buying an Apple car, but I just kind of figured it was
You
going to
didn't think you were
happen.
going to buy the Vision Pro either.
Yeah, but there's a one. I don't just randomly go out. Here's the thing: if they were to make an Apple car, that sucker would be $100,000.
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Well,
yeah. And I don't like my electric vehicle that much, and I don't like Apple less than I like my Tesla. So I'm definitely not going to go spend $100,000 on an Apple electric vehicle.
yeah. Well, I think also what's occurred in the automotive industry, particularly since the pandemic, because if you don't know, the auto industry was particularly hit hard with shortages and stuff when silicon
Silicon.
was
No.
in short supply because auto manufacturers rely on that stuff heavily. And one of the problems that the auto manufacturers have is that a lot of the silicon that they use is legacy stuff that they've been using for years and years and
Oh yeah,
years
10,
and years.
15 years. They're way behind the power curve when it comes to like actually
So
updating
it's not
their.
like, yeah, they're not tiny little
No.
chips that, I mean, so they were hit hard. And I don't know if you remember during the pandemic, like driving past an auto dealership and there's like no cars there, you know?
Well, that's what changed things with the used industry. So what was happening was they couldn't get new cars because they
Yep.
didn't have the chips. There was such a large shortage on the silicon, the stuff that they make the chips out of, that they couldn't make new ones.
Right.
And it was putting these huge pipeline delays. So then you started seeing all the prices of the used cars go up because people could only get used cars. So then the used car dealers are like, hey, well, we'll inflate the prices because demand is higher.
Right.
So, and now it's like, now there's so many new cars because they finally caught up with the bottleneck. But now it's like you have all these overpriced used cars everywhere that people don't want to buy.
And auto manufacturers, there was definitely an overall inflation of prices for almost everything.
Oh yeah, the
In-
dealer markups for no
But-
reason.
Yeah, well, and I remember seeing, I think it was John Rettinger was looking to buy, I forget what vehicle it was, but he
I think
lives
it's a
in,
Mercedes. I think
yeah,
it was
he
a
lives in
Mercedes.
California. I think it was one of the, yeah, you're right, Mercedes like minivan kind of thing or SUV kind of thing. And the dealer markup was like $50,000 or something.
Yeah, he had tweeted about it. I was, as soon as you started talking about this, I was thinking the same thing. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
mentioned it. But yeah, he had showed it. He was like, yeah, the dealer markup was around $50,000 on top of like the $75,000 price of the car.
Yeah, I mean, so that's $50,000 over MSRP, and in normal times, nobody pays MSRP, right?
No.
That's the way it's always been. But I think since the car market has started to be able to expand a little bit again, and new cars are becoming more and more available, car manufacturers have kept prices high, right? And so they're trying to hold on to those pandemic related inflation of the MSRP so that they can make back some of the money they lost over those couple of years. But
well, in addition to that, it's not even the price is still higher, but on top of that, you also have interest rates are insanely high.
Yeah.
And people are having a harder time getting credit. So it's I know this is not really super tech related at the moment. We got
but
here
it will
from
be
Silicon.
when we swing back to the Apple car.
Yes,
Then
it will be.
it'll be tech related, because I think that all of this had to have some play in Apple's decision to ditch the car, right? Because with the inflation of the car market, there are high ticket value cars like Ford's like Platinum Series, like tricked out Raptor pickup trucks that are like $110,000, and these trucks are coming out, and they're $100,000. They're as much as like a house in some places,
It's ridiculous.
and they're sitting on the lot. Nobody's buying them.
Yep.
And the dealerships are so deep into it cost wise that they can't really mark it down all that much.
I think
So
it's going to create a serious problem. Probably we're just seeing the early beginnings of this now, but it reminds me a lot of back in like 2008.
mhm.
There was a different time back then. It was different reasons, but I think ultimately we're going to end up having serious problems with these car manufacturers again because they've got all these cars they can't sell. So if
Yeah,
they can't sell the cars, what are they going to do with them?
yeah, and honestly, like I look at it as sort of like a market correction, if as well, because if you think back, if you're old enough to think back to like when Lee Iacocca at Chrysler came out with the Chrysler K car,
Hmm.
that was coming out of the gas shortages, and so and the car manufacturers were going through a lot of different growing pains for a lot of different reasons, and people weren't buying cars, and so Lee Iacocca saved Chrysler by figuring out how to make a reasonably priced, like sort of a reasonably priced sedan, which I guess you could kind of like the Chevy Malibu is a similar kind of car to what the K car was, but it was low cost. It wasn't super tricked out or anything. There weren't any like wood door panels or anything like that. But
Hmm.
it was a car that people could afford, and that started a new revolution of like affordable cars like the Ford Escort and things like that. So I
The
think that we're
four-cylinder
going.
Mustang.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that.
I had
You
one.
know, yeah, I know a lot of people did. I have a song called '93 Mustang, and it's like a personal joke to me. It's like a personal inside like ribbing because like the
Well,
'93 Mustang was like not really a Mustang, and I never reference it in the song. It's just like I know.
I had a '93. So just a quick trip down Adam's car memory lane.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a '93 LX 50 that I got in like 2006, and I had it for like 15 years. And I bought it, drove it for years, like rebuilt the engine, restored it. Like it was in really good shape. I ended up selling it to my brother because I didn't have room for like all the cars in my driveway,
Right.
and I wanted something that had a better air conditioner. But I had a 1990 four-cylinder Mustang that I bought off a buddy of mine. So
Right.
he had it, and it wasn't running. It was running, but it was having issues. So he was just going to do one of those cash for clunkers things and like donate, like where you sell it to a church and they pay you the title taxes or whatever, and they smash it up.
Right.
So I was like, "How much are they going to give you for it?" And he said 250. I said, "I'll give you 300." So he's like, "Yeah, sure, fine." So I buy this 1990 Mustang for $300, and this is back in 2006, I think, 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And I barely got it home. Like it would idle, but if you got on the gas, it would bog down, and the engine would start sputtering, and it would have no power. So I took it home, did some fiddle farting around, unbolted the exhaust manifold, and found out it was a like the catalytic converter had busted up, and the airflow wasn't getting out.
Right.
Ran like
Yeah.
a champ. Drove it for years, and it got like 28 miles to the gallon. So I was like, "This is great." And then I
Yeah.
gave it to my brother. It's for him to go off to college. So
Yeah.
I had both of them.
It's funny. Like I can't even think of how many cars I've owned. My first car was a Dodge Omni, a 1985 Dodge Omni. And I took my driving test on a 1982 Ford Escort,
Wow.
two-door manual Ford Escort. And yeah, it was and taking your driving test in a place like West Virginia on a manual transmission vehicle is it's a different level of stress because you know that the person is going to take you someplace where you have to like get it into gear and
You're
get
gonna be
up
on
the
an
hill.
incline.
you know, and get up the hill without drifting back. So that was fun, and
My
I mean,
my first ever car was a 2001 F-150. It was a single cab it was a V6 with a stick shift in it.
right?
And it was funny because I
Was it
drove
on
a
the
stick
tree or was it on the floor?
no on the floor. Yeah,
Yeah,
5 on the floor. And I I learned how to drive a stick shift in a farm truck out
Mm,
in like a field when I was like 14,
yeah.
15. One day, and then I had never driven a stick shift since then. Well, I went off to the military. I came back from my technical training school, and it was funny because I had to go guard the president's plane.
Mm,
So this is interesting story. I'll get there. So I had been driving our family minivan before I had left to go off to basic training and tech school. And when
right.
I come back, I found out my parents sold it, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, you need to get a car." I'm like, "But I have to go to work tomorrow." So I had applied for a loan. I went to CarMax down the street, and they had this single cab F-150. It was like my loan was for like 15 grand. I had just enough to buy it. It was a year old. It had like 7,000 miles on it, but it was a stick shift. And the guy's like, "You know how to drive a manual?" I'm like, "Well, I did in a field once 3 or 4 years ago." So I get in it. We go drive it. I mean, I made it around the little loop just so I could drive it. And then I'm like, I had all my military gear with me because my mom had dropped me off. I buy the truck, and then I go drive it to the base a few minutes down the road, like
Yeah.
he and hawing the whole way, driving the stick shift that I sucked at. And then
Yeah.
I went and I was sat back in a truck and guarded the back end of Air Force One for a few hours while Bush was here for a trip. But I, I did that a lot because I was Air Force Security Forces, which is like military police, but we would always guard Air Force One when it would come in for visits.
Right. Yeah. 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 I think the last manual transmission car I had was a 1996 Saab 95. Saab 900. That was before they went to 95. So it was a Saab 900, and that I got in 2003. And I used to love Saabs, and
Did you have the windshield wipers on the headlights?
no, not that one, but I did get a Saab 93 and I had a Saab 95, and they had those. So, but I actually test drove a Honda Odyssey, not Odyssey, a Honda what's the dang the one that you could take the seats out of and like hose down the inside.
Hyundai
Element.
or Hyundai? Or
A Honda Element.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so the first year they made those, they made them, they made like a base model in a manual, and there was one on this car lot that we were looking at cars, and I was like, I want to drive that thing. I've never driven one. I want to see what it's like. And so it had been almost 20 years since I drove a stick shift, and I was just like, can I do this? And the guy who works at the place is just standing there watching you trying to pull out. And
I love sticks. I love stick shift, man. I miss them, and it's one of those things where it's not great for everyday cars, but for sports cars, I feel like you still need one.
yeah,
And all of my sports cars up until I had a 2019 WRX STI, and it was a 6-speed manual, but my Supra. It was all automatic. Like they just came out with a manual model this year, finally. But the
right.
first 3 or 4 years only automatic, and then the Corvette now it's all automatic. So
Yeah.
like they don't make manuals in them anymore. Sucks.
It used to be that you could at least special order. I can't believe that I mean, it used to be that manual transmissions were on the cheapest cars, right?
Mhm.
And now, like, if you want one, you have to special order it.
Yeah,
But
well, a lot of them you can't even get them anymore.
yeah, I remember a friend of mine had one of the cheapest Saturns that you could get, like a little two-door Saturn, and it was, those cars were like $6,000. They were super cheap. This was in like the early 90s.
But I
And
remember.
this car was so cheap that not only was it a manual, but it had like crank windows and no power steering.
Wow.
So, and I mean, power steering is not a big deal, really, like, because once you get moving,
It's fine, but
it moves. But yeah, trying to turn the wheel without power steering while you're sitting in a parking spot or something, it's not easy. So I don't think there's probably a vehicle in the world made without power steering now. But yeah, I mean, getting back to the Apple car, I think that, all of this past history that we're discussing just sort of shows like the ebbs and flows of the car market. And so whereas like making an iPhone or making a computer or something like that is a pretty linear process, like it just iterates from one to the next to the next to the next, and you can do it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they spend 10 years building the Apple car. Who knows if it's another 5 or 10 years before they can put one out? And they wanted it to be like a totally self-driving, no steering wheel, no pedals, no no nothing. And like, what happens if the car market, adjusts itself again?
Well, I think another big component of this is, all right, take a look at what the EPA does to cars here.
Yeah.
And then take a look what the European Union has done to Apple with
Yeah.
regards to things that are happening with their phone. It's like, could you imagine them having to make a car and then satisfy the EU, satisfy USA with the EPA? Like, I think that they probably have also realized there's just too many headaches with certain things.
Well, I think they have an advantage in terms of like, well, there would be no emissions as an electric car, but in
Right.
terms of, I think the state with the strictest regulations is by far California, and they're in
Mhm.
California. So I think they would have been able to be on top of that to a certain extent, but yeah, it's not it making a car has to be a sort of fluid process. You have to be able to like change model years from one year to the next, and make one cheaper one year, and give people other choices. I just don't think Apple was really ever in the position to be a car manufacturer. But
Maybe in like 20 years. I mean, I the way we're going with connected technology and the internet and what the vision that most car manufacturers have nowadays is not so much, okay, get in your car and drive. They're
right.
starting to look at it as get in your car, have the car get you from point A to point B, and you be entertained or be able to work or multitask in the process. Like,
Yeah.
one of the biggest pain points in life has been commuting.
Yeah.
So if they can take the pain points out of commuting, have the car drive for you, then they can focus on keeping you entertained, finding ways for you to spend money while you're in the car,
Yeah.
and allowing you to be productive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I was reading up on this, and I watched a couple of videos, and one point that somebody made was that Apple has been developing on the software side things for this. They built Apple Maps, which was a disaster at the beginning, but it's turned out to be pretty good in recent years. But also Apple CarPlay. And CarPlay, I think the number they said was something like CarPlay is available in 98% of all new cars.
Mm.
So I mean, Android Auto is as well, but I mean, Apple was developing CarPlay. The end game was for CarPlay to be the iOS of their car, right?
Well, hopefully they
So
do more to it than they did with iPad OS.
yeah, CarPlay is interesting. Like our new Bronco has CarPlay,
I like
and
it.
yeah, I like it too, and it's a much better user experience than trying to do whatever the car manufacturer does in terms of like infotainment software. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. But one thing that's this sort of dovetails into this is the idea of like, okay, so no Apple Car, but one thing the Apple Car would have to have, and one thing that is of course the big topic of discussion this year and last year is AI.
Hmm.
And a lot of people outside of the tech world are looking at Apple and they're saying, well, Apple doesn't have, you know, Grok or some sort of Chat GPT thing, or they don't have it, so what's Google Gemini? Is that what they're calling it now? Or are they calling it
So
something else?
Google changed Bard. Bard is now called Gemini. And then there's different levels of Gemini because you have Gemini Nano, which is on the phones, and you have
Right.
Gemini. Then you have like Gemini Pro or something like that.
Yeah.
So Gemini is when you do on the PC. I think Gemini Pro is like the higher level for professionals. But even Google, so we've got OpenAI and ChatGPT stuff, but everybody was kind of looking at Google like Google should kind of be up there with like
Yeah.
the OpenAI project and ChatGPT. And even they've come under fire here recently because people have been using Gemini and been getting some like kind of weird results. Like, give me a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and it's like something weird shows up. So like they
Yeah.
actually had a serious kind of like conversation and some news backlash the other day. Like, look, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And so even Google is not quite where ChatGPT is at. But I do get this because some people, you look at Samsung, Samsung's all about AI with a new phone. You look at what the Pixel has done the last year or two, and they've
Right.
been AI, 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 but you don't hear from Apple. But a lot of the things that a lot of these companies are calling AI now was already there.
Yeah.
They're just calling it AI now. And when you take a look at the neural engine that Apple actually uses in their chip, it's actually quite powerful. They just are not attaching a bunch of catchphrases like we've got deep fusion, we've got all these other things that they do with computational photography and color
Right.
science. Like there's a lot of it's in there. They just haven't been throwing the name AI around.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point. I was actually going back and looking through some notes from previous years, and yeah, deep fusion and computational photography both were things that Apple put into phones. I think I want to say it was like the iPhone 11 or so.
11, I think. I think
Yeah,
11 is when 11 Pro got deep fusion.
yeah. So they've been doing this stuff, and I mean, the new S24 line has AI, right?
Yeah.
But then if you go into the settings of your S24 Ultra, it tells you what the AI stuff is, and it's like it'll like help you write a text message. It'll fix your photos. It's like, well, this is stuff that it's not world breaking, world bending stuff. It's stuff that already existed, and maybe it's somewhat enhanced at this point, but it was there
Oh,
before.
yeah. It's been there for years. And the other thing that, I mean, some stuff hasn't been, but a lot of the things that Samsung really has said that there is AI is actually stuff that they're just rebranding that is
Yeah,
Google.
yeah,
So you look at Google. Google's had Live Translate for years,
yeah,
and now we have Samsung. They're like, oh, we have the interpreter app. They're like, well, we already had, you know, live
yeah,
translation. So they're basically just using Google stuff and giving it a name. Like, but it's also funny because one of the biggest things they advertised during the S24 launch with AI was their Circle to Search feature, which is built in.
right.
And then as the keynote is happening, Google tweets, by the way, Circle to Search will be available the exact same day on Pixel phones. And then you're like, oh, so I had actually made a video about this before it came out because I was like, all right, is it going to be real AI or is it stuff that Samsung has manufactured or
Right.
is it just going to use Google's? And 90% of the stuff is just Google's AI.
Yeah, which I guess is fine, but AI is becoming a catchphrase for smartphone manufacturers right now, in the same way that like 5G
5G.
was. I mean, I'm sitting here in my house, and I'm still on LTE. I ain't got no 5G. And it's like 5 years later, but it's a marketing thing right now for
Mhm.
a lot of these companies. And yes, Google makes Android. Android has this stuff built in. You can ask yourself whether or not it's like copacetic for Samsung to take the Google features that are included in Android 14 and like call them something different and say it's theirs. I don't know, but none of it is really like world changing, right? Not in the same way that like what was it, Sora, the new
Yeah.
like now the AI is making like full on realistic video.
Yeah, I think
And
they're like 10 or 15-second video clips. And it's, I mean, not something that everybody has access to at this point, but there's been there's been like a two-prong shift in this over the last couple of years because everybody was saying AI. Like I remember when we had the S23 launch last year, how many times did AI get mentioned? Basically like none.
none. And
And then
that's because it came out in January, February,
yeah,
right
and
when
then
ChatGPT was sort of like being introduced into the world and going through its different iterations. And by the time the year is over, like everything is AI. But Samsung's marketing team wasn't on the ball with that because
yeah.
it wasn't a thing yet.
So it wasn't a thing. So if we look at where we went from a year ago, basically you're like, Chat GPT, give me a paragraph about the fundamentals of thermodynamics.
Yeah,
And you might get a good answer.
yeah,
To where then we went to like, oh, write me a here's a prompt, write me a 5-paragraph essay in the voice of Mark Twain.
Yeah.
And that was cool. Everybody loved that. And now, a year later, you can put in creative prompts and get realistic, lifelike looking video clips.
Yeah.
So there's been a huge advancement here on the software side, and the manufacturers. Like, I went to MediaTek Summit back in November, and that was a big thing with their new Dimensity 9300. They were talking about all the improvements to AI. So a lot of what's catching up with AI is actually having the chips that are optimized to handle these processes and these tasks instead of just normal processing tasks.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there had to be the hardware was not ready for the software in a lot of applications. And now I think next year and the year after, we'll start seeing a lot more advancements
Yeah.
because we'll have the hardware to support it.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before. Like, AI on a phone is not really going to be a huge big change for the way people use their phones until it can be like, Jarvis. Everybody talks about Jarvis from Iron Man, right? Like, have a conversation with him and he's like, "Oh, I don't know, sir." It's like, so until we can have like contextual conversations with our phones and they interact with us and we're problem solving together, that I don't think there's going to be it's not going to be any earth shattering change, right? But it is going to be very interesting to see. Somebody brought this up in the context of education the other day. And, so this person was talking about how they were studying Greek and trying to translate a particular Greek poet who, was a specific dialect of old, like ancient Greek that was really difficult to get into. And so to translate it was very, very difficult. And so this guy worked on it and worked on it, took it to class and had his professor look at it. And he's like, "Well, this is really good work, but you missed this." And so, it all has to be redone. Right. And he made the point that students of the 21st century from here on out, or even maybe before, we used to complain about the fact that you could use Wikipedia to do research, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I first started going to college in 2000, the professors are like, "You can't use Wikipedia."
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like the greatest danger to academics in terms of what the internet could do for you. But now you can ask it to write you the essay. Mm-hmm. You can ask it to translate the ancient Greek. And now all of those things are shortcuts for sure. But the point that this guy made was that no matter how you get the outcome, the thing that students of today and tomorrow won't get that he did was the sense of accomplishment, the sense of doing that work, building discipline in order to like really dig deeply and do that kind of work. And it's not, you can translate this over the course of anything, but it was a character building exercise. It was improving him as a student, and later that would have improved him as a professor or whatever he went on to do, right?
A lot of that stuff, a lot of people look at it and you go, "Oh, I got to write this stupid paper." But in the course of reading a book, doing some research, getting some citations, creating a point, supporting it, and creating an original piece based off of your thought processes and presenting that, it's formulating and cultivating a lot of different things in your brain. That teaches you hard work. It teaches you to think critically. It teaches you time management. There's just so many things. And now we're in this like instant ramen, like cup of noodles culture where I get that you can get the product by talking into a phone and say, give me this. But it does cut out a lot of those fundamental like life skills that you build in the process. So if you look at somebody in your generation, my generation, and then we look at our kids, like, because your daughter, I know she's about 20.
She's 20, yeah.
Yeah, and my son, he's going to be 18 in 2 days. The world for them is going to be completely different. It's like the biggest thing we had to worry about in high school is, show your work for your math. And
Yeah.
now like nobody cares anymore. Like show me the work for your paper, right?
Yeah.
Or you
Well,
can.
there are ways, as a former English teacher, there are ways if you're teaching like at a lower level, there are ways that you can force students to show their work. Like you can say, okay, outline due by blank,
Yeah,
and introductory
rough
paragraph
draft.
due by blank, rough draft due by blank. It'd be really hard to make Chat GPT like have all those things created and have them all sort of feel like a real person.
Mm.
So there are ways to do it, but at the same time, like I can't imagine being in the workforce now. Like as a former creative, I guess creative class worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did editorial and graphic design and all kinds of different stuff over the years. So much of that stuff now is like going to be a totally different ballgame, you know?
Oh yeah, but it's one of those things where you go. It takes me back to the conversation about cursive
Mm,
because so much of our communication is no longer handwritten. Like everything's all typed, it's all digital, it's all printed.
right.
Everybody could write and print, but for the longest time, remember they used to teach in school. I mean, I learned handwriting when I was in like elementary. I learned in
Uh,
junior high. You had a handwriting course. You learned how to like a specific class in handwriting,
yeah. And you
and
make the
just like
A and the small a and the big B and the small b and,
and
you
now
know,
you show kids cursive and they're like, "What's that?"
yeah.
and it's like, okay, well, I mean, I appreciate that that it's not really necessary. We're just like typing. There used to be typing classes in school or
The,
so
one of the things about cursive, though, is that, and actually, I mentioned this on Twitter, and Aaron Zolo says that they still teach cursive in his child's school district, which I thought was interesting because I thought it was totally gone. One of the things about cursive is that it really helps you at that very young age build eye-hand coordination,
yeah.
and so you learn how to do that, and typing helps you build eye-hand coordination as well, but it's not the same set of skills.
No.
And so I do think that something's lost when you lose that basic skill that you build over the first few years of school.
And that's where I'm getting with this whole AI thing, with where we're going now, with what with what functions it's taking over and what it's doing. It's taking a lot of the learning process out that got us the end products
Yeah.
that people used to create, and it's like I think that'll honestly do people a disservice in the long run because you're not going to have built those mental
Yeah.
processes, the hard work, and the understanding on how to like problem solving.
Yeah.
It's going to it reduces the brain's capacity, I think, to problem solve.
Yeah, and ultimately I think that, every generation's education system has its own challenges that it has to overcome, right?
Mhm.
And I think for the generation, like our kids' generation, their kids are gonna, they're all gonna have to figure out a way to help kids gain the skills that they need to gain that are valuable to life. I realize everybody thinks that school is pointless, and it's just you're just biding your time until you're 18 years old, but you do build skills that help you then go out and be a productive adult. And whether or not you ever use algebra again is sort of not the point. It's
I was going to bring that up because like I'm terrible at math, and I did college algebra. I did job. That was one of the worst moments in my life when it came to college because I ended up getting a bachelor's of science, not a bachelor's of arts. And if you get a bachelor's of arts, you only need college algebra. But the program I got into was only a bachelor's of science. So
yeah,
then I was working on my degree plan, and they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, you have to do another math class." I was like, "Say what?"
yeah,
Then I had to do geometry, and actually, I did really. I was always really good at geometry. So it's like it's weird because they say some people can do algebra but can't do geometry, and then some people are good at geometry and can't do regular algebra, and then there's like this little small
yeah.
like subset of people that get both.
I think it's like that sort of visual learner versus like, what is the opposite of visual learner?
Hands on.
something like that. But yeah, geometry, I took geometry in 10th grade, and then I didn't take any more math classes in high school. And then when I got into college, they had a class that counted as like the 3 credits you needed for math. But it was like not really. It was a math class. You had to do some math, but it was sort of like math history. It just went through like all of the historic points that happen in math and teach you how to, like all the different weird stuff. But everybody called it math for artists and athletes. I forget, it was like math 103 or something, but everybody called it math for artists and athletes. And but even that was like still really valuable, because I did have to do some math, and I did learn contextual stuff about like how math developed, how math came to work in the ways that it does, and what it's good for, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think that once we get AI permeating everything, it's going to be a much different ballgame. Like, I like to use AI like to say, hey, give me, the names and dates and places of, whatever this is, this thing I want to talk about. Give me an outline of names, dates, places, like bullet points of important aspects of whatever it is. But I would then use that as just like a way for me to have right at hand, if I'm doing a video or something, the names, dates, places, all that kind of stuff, so I can be more accurate as I just, extemporaneously talk about something, right? And but yet at the same time, there's still going to be plenty of people out there who are just, going to they're just going to let ChatGPT write them a video script, and then they're going to plug it into one of those voice machines. And
well, it's interesting to me whenever you look at AI in a content creation context, because at what point are you no longer creating, and instead you're just an extension of, so all that stuff is fed from somewhere. Like we get like Google. So yeah. I could go into Google right now, and or YouTube rather. So I'll go into YouTube, which is made by Google. I'll go into my Creator YouTube Studio, and there's actually a tab in here under Analytics for research.
Yeah.
And it says, okay, top searches for me, for my content, Samsung S24 Ultra display test. Why S23 Ultra is better than S24 Ultra. Why S23 Ultra versus S24 Ultra screen reflection. So these are top suggested search things that it's saying, okay, I should make more things like that. It's like suggestions.
Right.
Well, yeah. Okay, let's say I take that. And then I go to a ChatGPT or some sort of AI assistant and go, write me a script based off of this. And then it generates this. Yeah. So then it's like, you're not even creating anymore. Like basically YouTube is feeding itself its own products through you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you also have to be able to discern, because I look at that research stuff sometimes as well. And vidIQ does this, and TubeBuddy has a feature similar to it. TubeBuddy has a like it'll give you 5 other suggestions for your title. Once you sort of like put your title into your uploaded box. And sometimes I use those, and sometimes they do really well. But I like to go back and try and figure out like, well, why did it do well? And with a lot of those suggestions that YouTube will give you, some of them are based on search volume. Some of them are based on, and some of it's based on what you've done in the past, but it doesn't have the storytelling context, like the sort of overarching theme that you might be weaving throughout like a series of 5 videos about a product, right?
Well, the lifeblood that actually gets somebody to watch your video.
Right. So ultimately, like, if people start to use it this way, I think that they'll discover that it might make you a video, and it might make it easier to make a video. but it's not going to make you a good video. And maybe one day, I don't know, but still,
well, we're still in the early stages of this, but I could see that. But it's just I know I was talking about removing the creative process out of it,
yeah,
but it's like instead of instead of it being AI to help you, it's basically like it's funny to me when you get suggestions like this from YouTube, and if you were to incorporate AI, because then it's basically
right.
it's like YouTube is telling you what to put on its platform for it.
Well, and I mean that's both good and bad. I mean, anytime you listen to anybody talk about YouTube and its algorithm and how it tries to present stuff to the viewer, and how it judges what the viewer wants to see and all that kind of stuff. I mean, YouTube is telling you that its information from its internal systems says that, using this set of criteria for your channel, here are things that other people are having success with, and the YouTube algorithm is pushing towards other people.
It's funny though, right? Because even if you get a recommendation from YouTube though, and you go make that video, it may not perform well.
Oh no.
But it's funny because whenever you look at YouTube and you have YouTube and like you have a Mr. Beast video and then you have a me video, YouTube already has us in our little corner, right? So even if you make the best video that you could make, the best video you could make might still only be a 5,000 view video.
It really depends though, because we were talking earlier about Front Page Tech, and they've made sort of a content shift, and they've like triple or quadrupled their views over the course of 5 or 6 videos. Mm-hmm. And that's, I can only say, like, one time might be an outlier. They get 1 million views on one video, but getting like over 250,000 views on 5 straight videos, like that to me, I mean, you have to be really educated in YouTube and how the algorithm works and all those kinds of things to sort of be able to parse that out. But I think it's possible, but it's like really difficult.
Well, the other thing too is if you look at, like, let's say my channel, because YouTube does put us in boxes.
Yeah.
And if you make a video every day, they won't give you 100,000 views on every video. But if you make one video a week and it performs well, like I see some people that make like one video a week and they might get 60,000 views on their one video, whereas I make 8 videos and I get 60,000 views, So it's like, even there are ways where you can kind of change it up. And I've entertained this before, but the problem is I like to talk too much, which is why I make videos every day, because there's always something I want to talk about. Like I can't just sit like, okay, this is the one video I make this week. Like I can't do that. Like I want to talk about all the things. Yeah. So that's why I do it. But there are different models. So like if they were like, let's say, making 3 videos a week, right? And getting 90,000, 80,000, 100,000, and then they make 1 video a week. Well, you also have to look at it this way, because most people who subscribe don't watch every video you make.
Right.
So if you make 1 video that week instead of 3, it's more likely you're going to have a larger amount of your fan base watch it, which is going to boost it even higher into YouTube analytics.
Yeah, and better. you're gonna train your viewers that like that one video is their shot to see your content that week, right? But meanwhile, like if you put out 3 videos a week, or if you put out a video every day, or even like 2 videos a week or whatever, your viewer also then knows in the back of their mind, like, well, yeah, I'm really busy right now and I'm not super interested in that. So so-and-so will have another video this week that I'll be able to catch. And there's no right or wrong way, I guess, to do it. But it's always this weird moving target. And I think that AI is not going to solve that problem. Like, if YouTube says that the algorithm, no matter what it does, and the algorithm is kind of like a black box. I don't think YouTube really knows how the algorithm works. I mean, they can feed it different information in different quantities.
I think they used to, but the problem is that it's so adaptive and it learns so much by what's constantly filtered into it. And that's where I think came this big shift a few years ago. If you remember, 4 years ago, you and I, we could put out a video and it could get 100,000 views.
Oh yeah.
And now it's like you drop a video and you're just hoping that you get 5,000.
Yeah.
And YouTube's algorithm has gotten smarter because, see, it used to treat a lot of like it used to remember what was it? AI, no, internet. What was it? What were we fighting over a few years ago with the internet? Was internet, non-internet something? God, what was it? Internet. Anyway, so like we're basically, all traffic was treated the same instead of getting prioritized, or you could like have different ways to manipulate that in your favor. Well, whenever it comes to, lost my train of thought.
Well, I think what you're getting at is the idea that now YouTube's algorithm has gotten so smart that there's no way for a creator to game the system, or at least not as much of a way for a creator to game the system, because YouTube, there's a new feature. It's been around for like a couple of months now. Whenever you say like and subscribe and you're watching on a desktop, the subscribe button goes bling.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so that's really cool, and it helps the creator, but it also tells you that YouTube knows everything that you're saying in your video.
Oh yeah, I've done that for a long time. When you upload it and it's processing, it's looking at it saying, is it eligible for ads? Is he saying anything inappropriate?
Right.
There's like all sorts of things that it filters through there. But that's what I was getting at. Used to be, you would put a video out, it would have the same shot. Like you put a video out, Mr. Beast put a video out, let the cards fall how they may. But see, YouTube knows that tech videos don't really make up a lot of YouTube traffic. So it's like now, instead of being on this level where you have the potential to reach a massive audience, you have a targeted audience where it puts it in there, and then it will feed it out from there if it's successful as it goes, but it doesn't have like this massive reach anymore.
And I think that YouTube does categorize different creators on different tiers based on performance.
Yeah.
So, there's no, I think everybody knows that it happens. Nobody knows exactly how or why. But the signals that you send to YouTube, like, if you're a YouTube creator in 2024, the best thing to do is just make the best video you can. And learn about making videos and sort of be a student of your craft, because trying to figure out how to get people to watch your how to get the algorithm to show your stuff is just, it's a fool's errand, because the algorithm is parsing so many data points that you can't possibly, with your feeble human mind, figure out how to trick it. Right.
I think there's still a lot of truth to that, though, and I think that when it comes to like what you said with Front Page Tech, and they're making these videos that are having a better success, it's because they're resounding better with their audience. And if you make a video that your audience wants to watch, it's going to perform better. So
and then it's going to get shown to more people, which is going to expand your audience. And that ultimately is what you want to do. So you don't only want to make a video that's going to get your audience to watch, but you also want to make a video that if somebody who's never seen your channel gets to that video, your topic is such that they're interested in checking it out too. And you can only do that by building skill. It's you can't do it with marketing. You can't do it with, trying to game the system with like clickbait. Everybody complains about clickbait, but I mean, clickbait works, but each year it works differently, right?
Well, I think there's a lot of context. Because I get a lot of people. I don't make a lot of thumbnails or titles that could be considered clickbait, but you have to parse something out. Like, is it clickbait or was it just a good thumbnail? Like, was it attractive or was it over the top? Because I run into these things all the time. You read an article and it's like, you can't believe what Taylor Swift did now. and you click on it. Like, I wouldn't click on that, but and then it's something that's completely stupid. It's nothing. It's fluff. They just used that to get you to click on it.
Yeah.
So my litmus test is, does the title and the thumbnail match up with what the content is? Does it deliver?
Yeah. Well, and the term clickbait really came from, I mean, the person that I most associate it with is Philip DeFranco back in the old days, where he would put like a girl in a bikini on the thumbnail, but there would be no girl with a bikini in the video. You know, there
delivery,
no mention of a girl, no picture of a girl. You know, people still use that all the time, but you know, it's the whole like setup and delivery. If you
it'd be like if I go, I'm going to watch Dune tonight, right?
Yeah.
And let's say I'm going to watch Dune, and then they have a picture of Tom Cruise on the poster art.
Right.
And you get in there, and you're like watching the whole video for Tom Cruise to show up, and he just never shows up.
Right.
Right. I went to go, like, I clicked on this because Tom Cruise, I wanted to see Tom Cruise in Dune.
Yeah. And that's not going to happen. But, you know,
no.
I'm just trying to imagine the Tom Cruise run in the Dune context. Anyway, I know that we just went off on multiple tangents, but I got to go. You got to go. Time is short.
The important thing, we'll recap this. Okay.
Yeah.
Apple's no longer making a car. The automotive industry sucks. AI can be good, but it's going to eliminate some building blocks and skills that people use to do things. And we both miss manual transmission cars.
Yes. I think that the title of this podcast will be Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. Okay, Boomer.
Painfully honest tech rambling. So honest it sucks.
Yeah. But I mean, this is a conversation that I think, you know, our generation is probably the only generation that's not in the, you know, like reaching, you know, age-related dementia levels of age.
I've got it. Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. AI is ruining kids.
Yeah.
AI is destroying the future.
Yes. AI will eat your kids.
There you go.
So there you go.
It's not clickbait because you got it all the way at the end of the video.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks so much for being here, folks. Once again, thanks to Adam for co-hosting. And do watch out for the link down in the description that will take you to the brand new podcast channel. That's where the next episode is going to end up. So do check that out. If you have any questions, comments, other things that you want to get to us, let us know. If you want to subscribe to the Painfully Honest Tech channel, you can click subscribe here. You can go over to check out Adam's channel, Tech Odyssey, and subscribe to him. We do videos all the time. And so once again, thanks so much for being here. My name is Jason, sometimes known as the JTL Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. The podcast so honest it hurts. Until the next time, we are out.
Peace.